The Speakeasy Sleuth, Season 1, Episode 2. The Missing Flapper. Some mornings arrive with coffee and optimism. Saturday morning arrived with Bernie Kowalski's tears. I'd just opened Hartwood's flowers when he appeared in the doorway, still in yesterday's clothes, his weathered face gray with worry. In the 2 years I'd known him, I'd never seen Bernie cry. I'd seen him fix a burst pipe in freezing weather without complaint. I'd seen him carry unconscious drunks up my stairs without breaking a sweat. I'd seen him calmly instruct me how to pick a lock while police pounded on the door, but I'd never seen him cry. "Rosie's gone," he said, his voice cracking on his granddaughter's name. "She didn't come home last night." I locked the door behind him and led him to the back room, my mind already racing. Rosie Kowalski was 19, bright-eyed and full of the kind of fearless joy that made Bernie both proud and terrified. She worked days at Marshall Field's department store and spent her evenings at the Velvet Note, where Dolly had been teaching her to sing. "Tell me everything," I said, guiding him to sit, "from the beginning." Bernie's hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette. I took the matches from him and did it myself, a small intimacy that spoke to how far we'd fallen from our usual roles. Bernie was the one who took care of everyone else. Seeing him need care was like watching the foundation of a building crack. "She was here Friday night," he said, exhaling smoke with the words. "I was upstairs fixing the leak in your apartment. I heard her laughing, singing with Dolly. Around 11, she came up to say goodnight, told me she was going straight home." His voice dropped. "She lied to me, Ellie." "You're sure she didn't go home?" "Her mother called me at 6 this morning. Rosie never came back. Her bed wasn't slept in. Her mother's been sick with worry all night, but she didn't want to involve the police because—" He trailed off, but I understood. Polish immigrants, even ones who'd been in Chicago for 30 years, still didn't trust the police, especially not when those police were run by Captain Frank Donnelly. "Did Rosie seem upset? Worried?" I asked. Bernie shook his head slowly. "Happy? She seemed happy. That's what makes it worse. Like she was—" He struggled with the words. "Like she was excited about something." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I'd been 19 once, in love and reckless, thinking the world was full of possibility instead of danger. I remembered that particular kind of excitement, the kind that came with secrets. "I need to call Finn and Dolly," I said. "If Rosie was here Friday night, someone saw something, someone knows something." Bernie looked at me with desperate hope in his eyes. "You'll find her? Like you found the truth about Mrs. Ashworth?" I wished I had his faith. Finding a killer was one thing. Killers left evidence, made mistakes, followed patterns. But finding a missing girl in Chicago? That was finding one particular needle in a city full of haystacks. "I'll find her," I said anyway, because sometimes lying to spare someone pain is the only kindness you can offer. "I promise." Within an hour, my office behind the bar had become a war room. Dolly arrived first, still in her dressing gown, her hair unpinned and falling past her shoulders. Finn came next, smelling of the whiskey he'd been distilling in his cousin's basement. Vi showed up uninvited but determined, notebook in hand, ready to help however she could. Bernie sat in the corner, silent now, smoking cigarette after cigarette while we worked. "All right," I said, standing at my desk like a general addressing troops. "Rosie was here Friday night. Who saw her? Who talked to her?" Dolly raised her hand, her usual warmth dimmed by worry. I did. We were practicing a new song, "Someone to Watch Over Me." She has a lovely voice, soft and sweet. She was nervous about singing in front of people, but I told her she was ready. Her voice caught. We finished around 10:30. She helped me put away the music and then— Dolly's eyes widened. "Oh, honey, I should have noticed. She kept looking at the door, like she was expecting someone." Who? I asked. I don't know. I was focused on the music, not... Dolly pressed her hands to her face. I should have paid attention. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. Finn, did you see anything? Finn had been quiet, but now he spoke with his usual economy. She came to the bar last night around 10:30, ordered a lemon water, said she didn't want alcohol, wanted to keep her voice clear. I remember thinking that was smart. I assumed she was singing with Dolly later. He frowned, remembering. She was wearing something new, a green dress, very modern, not her usual style. A green dress? Bernie looked up sharply. I didn't give her money for a new dress. Vi had been scribbling in her notebook, but now she looked up. A green dress with beading on the hem, drop waist, very fashionable? That's the one, Finn confirmed. Vi bit her lip. That dress is from Marshall Field's. I saw it in their window last week. It costs $25. The number hung in the air. $25 was nearly 2 weeks' wages for a shopgirl like Rosie. Either she'd been saving for months, or someone had given her the money. Vi hesitated, then added, Rosie did tell me something else last week. Captain Donnelly's son has been bothering her at Marshall Field's. Frank Jr. Bought her a silk scarf and wouldn't take no for an answer when she tried to refuse it. She seemed uncomfortable about it. Bernie thought, I saw a fancy car, black with chrome bumpers, parked outside the flower shop last night around 9. I noticed because it pulled up, but nobody exited the car. It was there all evening. It could be Frank. A chill ran through me. Frank Jr. Donnelly wasn't just a nuisance. He was the son of a powerful police captain with a reputation for getting what he wanted. Did Rosie speak to anyone at Velvet Note last night? I asked Finn. He nodded his head. Yes. A young man came in around 11. Chinese fellow, well-dressed, maybe 22 or 23. He went straight to Rosie. They talked for a few minutes and then he left. Dolly went very still. When she spoke, her voice was careful, controlled. What did this young man look like? Tall, slender, good suit. Had that university look about him. Smooth hands, expensive haircut. Finn paused. Why? Do you know him? Dolly closed her eyes. Tommy. It was my brother Tommy. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Bernie stood slowly, his face a mixture of confusion and something darker. Betrayal, maybe, or the beginning of anger. Your brother, he said flatly. Your brother was here, with my Rosie, and you didn't tell me? Dolly's hands twisted in her lap. Tommy came to visit me in the spring. He stayed for a few months, said he needed a break from the conservatory. He met Rosie during her singing lessons. She looked up at Bernie, her eyes pleading. I knew they'd become friendly. I thought it was harmless. 2 young people who liked music and talking. Besides, he was heading back to New York. Her voice trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air between them. And Rosie was expecting him last night? I said quietly. Perhaps there was more to their relationship than you thought? Bernie sank back into his chair. How long? His voice was barely a whisper. How long has this been going on? None of us had an answer. The pieces were scattered. An expensive dress Rosie couldn't afford, Frank Donnelly Jr.'s unwanted attention, a fancy car parked outside the building, and now Dolly's brother, who'd been friendly with her for months. Had someone given her that dress, or had she saved every penny to buy it herself? And if she left with someone, was it by choice? Bernie, I said gently, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you know Rosie was seeing someone? He looked at me with wounded eyes. She's 19. Of course I knew she was interested in boys, but this... He gestured helplessly. A corrupt cop's son? A Chinese boy? Ellie, you don't understand. Her mother, my daughter, she would never allow any of this. Never. The shame. The shame of what? Dolly's voice was sharp now, angry. What are you getting at? The shame, knowing she might love someone who isn't Polish? The same shame my parents faced when they dared to run a restaurant in a white neighborhood? The same shame I face every time I sing for your customers, Bernie? Dolly, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. That's not— It is exactly that, she interrupted, standing now, her eyes bright with tears. Bernie stood too, his face flushed. I don't know who she is with. I want her back because she's missing, because she's 19 years old and could be hurt or dead somewhere in this city, because I'm her grandfather and I love her. Then maybe you should love her enough to let her make her own choices. Enough! My voice cut through the argument like a knife through smoke. Both of them fell silent, breathing hard, staring at each other across a gulf that suddenly felt much wider than the few feet between them. I took a breath, steadying myself. Rosie is missing. That's what matters right now. Whether she ran away with Tommy or something worse happened, we need to find her. Bernie, I know this isn't what you wanted for your granddaughter. Dolly, I know you're defending your brother, but right now we need to work together. Can you do that? They both nodded, reluctant, still angry but contained. Good, I said. Now, Dolly, do you have any idea where Tommy might take Rosie? Dolly sank back into her chair, some of her anger draining away. If he's still in Chicago, he'd take her to Chinatown, to our cousin Ming's place. Ming runs a boarding house on Clark Street. Then that's where we start, I said. I turned to Vi. I need you to do something for me. Find out everything you can about Frank Donnelly Jr., where he drinks, who he paws at, and whether anyone's seen him with Rosie in the last week. Talk to the shop girls at Marshall Fields, the chorus girls, the hat shops, anybody who trades in gossip. If he's been sniffing around her, I want to know. Vi's mouth curved in a sharp little smile. Rich boy trouble, my favorite flavor. And once you've squeezed your sources dry, I added, swing by the train stations. If Rosie left the city with Tommy, someone might remember a young Chinese man and a young white woman traveling together. They'd stand out. Vi nodded, already standing. I'll start with the girls who've had to fend Donnelly off and see what they've heard about Rosie. After that, I'll check Union and Dearborn. If Tommy's name is on a ticket stub or Rosie's, I'll find it. As Vi hurried out, I pulled on my coat. Finn, I need you to stay here in case Rosie comes back, and— I hesitated. In case the police come asking questions. Finn understood immediately. You think Donnelly might get involved? I think if Bernie's daughter files a missing persons report, Donnelly will make it complicated. We're talking about his son. I didn't need to elaborate. Everyone knew how Captain Donnelly operated. Bernie stood, putting his hand on my arm. I'm coming with you. I wanted to refuse. Bernie was in no state to handle what we might find. But I also understood if Rosie was out there, scared and alone, she'd want to see her grandfather's face, and if something had happened to her, well, Bernie deserved to know. He deserved to be there. All right, I said, but Dolly comes too. If we're going to Chinatown, we need someone who speaks Cantonese. Dolly grabbed her coat without a word. The three of us headed for the door, leaving Finn behind to mind the fort. As we stepped out into the cold Chicago morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something more complicated than a simple case of young love. Something about the timing felt wrong. Chinatown on a Saturday afternoon was alive with a different kind of energy than the Velvet Note on a Friday night. Vendors called out in Cantonese, selling vegetables and dried fish and mysterious bundles wrapped in paper. Children ran between the stalls, laughing and shouting. Old men sat outside tea houses, playing mahjong with intense concentration. and everyone stared at us. Or more specifically, everyone stared at Bernie and me. Two white faces in a sea of Chinese faces, clearly out of place, clearly not there to shop or eat or admire the neighborhood. Dolly they recognized, some with nods of acknowledgement, others with barely concealed disappointment. I could read the judgment in their eyes. One of their own, working in a white woman's speakeasy, singing for white audiences. Selling out, they probably thought. Forgetting where she came from. If Dolly noticed, she didn't show it. She led us through the narrow streets with confidence, greeting the occasional shopkeeper in rapid Cantonese, asking questions that got quick shakes of heads or shrugs. No one had seen Tommy. Or if they had, they weren't telling a woman who'd left Chinatown to make her fortune in the white world. Ming's boarding house was on the third floor of a building that smelled of cooking oil and incense. Dolly knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. Some kind of signal, apparently, because the door opened immediately. The man who answered was about 40, with graying hair and shrewd eyes that took in our little group with instant assessment. He spoke to Dolly in Cantonese, his tone wary but not hostile. Dolly responded, gesturing to Bernie and me. I caught Tommy's name and Rosie's and what might have been the word for missing. Ming's expression shifted from wariness to alarm. He spoke rapidly to Dolly, shaking his head, gesturing inside. Dolly's face fell. He says Tommy was here, she translated. Friday night, late. He came to say goodbye. More rapid conversation. Then Dolly turned to us with a mixture of relief and worry. New York. Tommy took the midnight train to New York. Bernie staggered slightly and I caught his arm. His face had gone pale, his breathing shallow. New York, he whispered. Did my Rosie? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The implications hung between us like smoke. A secret relationship with a Chinese man would make Rosie a pariah in her own community. Her mother would disown her. The Polish church would turn its back. Her whole life, everything she'd known, would be gone. But maybe that was what she wanted. Maybe she'd looked around at her future, working at Marshall Fields, living with her mother, eventually marrying some Polish boy her family approved of and settling into a life that looked exactly like her mother's life and her grandmother's life before that, and decided it wasn't enough. Maybe she'd chosen love over safety, but we didn't know. Ming had only seen Tommy. We walked back to the Velvet Note in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The city moved around us. Trolleys clanging, vendors shouting, the perpetual motion of Chicago on a Saturday afternoon. Rosie was still missing. Vi was waiting for us when we got back, bouncing on her heels with the barely contained energy of someone who'd really had to work for her news. I have 3 things, she said before we'd even closed the door. First, it's not Frank Donnelly Jr. Bernie blinked. You're sure? Oh, I earned this one, Vi said, tipping her hat back. I started at Marshall Fields, found the girl who sells perfume on Rosie's floor. She says Frank Jr. has been hanging around, all teeth and entitlement, but Friday night he was busy losing money in Lakeview. I checked with a hat shop girl who sometimes sees him, and then with one of the chorus girls from the Green Mill who definitely sees him. They all heard the same story. Rich boy, drunk at a poker game until the small hours, loud enough that half the room could swear he never left. Some of the tension drained from Bernie's face, but only a fraction. So he's a pest, he muttered, but not this. Exactly, Vi said, which brings me to the second thing. Union Station was a harder nut. She hooked her thumbs in her belt, warming to the tail. First porter I talked to barely looked at me, she said. Second one said he sees 100 couples a night and didn't remember anyone, so I found the woman who runs the newsstand and asked her who actually pays attention around there. She pointed me to the station master, old fellow with a tidy mustache and a memory like a ledger. Vi's eyes sparkled. He didn't remember them at first either, but when I said I was looking for a young Chinese man and a young white woman traveling together, nicely dressed, very much in love, he stopped, thought about it. Then he snapped his fingers and said, "Wait, there was a pair like that." The room went very still. "He checked his book," Vi went on. "2 one-way tickets on the Midnight Express to New York, bought late, just before boarding. He remembered them because he thought they were sweet, said they couldn't stop smiling at each other, said it looked like they were running toward something, not away." Bernie sank into a chair, the confirmation hitting him like a physical blow. His voice was barely audible. "Rosie," he whispered, "and Tommy." Vi's enthusiasm wilted as she took in our faces. "And, third thing," she added more quietly. "The train arrival in New York is 7 p.m., so whatever they were running toward, they'll be there tonight." She shifted her weight, suddenly unsure. Did I do something wrong?" "No, Vi," I said, managing a tired smile as I crossed to her. "You did exactly what I asked. You chased down Frank Jr., you squeezed the gossip, you charmed a station master, and you brought us the truth. That's more than most detectives manage in a week." Her shoulders eased a fraction. "So, we know where Rosie went and with whom," she said. "Now what?" "Now," I said, looking from Bernie to Dolly, feeling the weight of the choice settling on all of us. "We decide whether we let them stay gone." "When does the next train leave?" I asked Dolly quietly. She understood what I was asking. Could we catch them? Bring Rosie back? "There's a train at midnight. Gets into New York tomorrow afternoon." Bernie was already moving toward the door. "Then we're taking it. I need to talk to my granddaughter. I need to tell her." His voice broke again. "I need to make sure she's safe." I put my hand on his arm, stopping him. "Bernie, what exactly are you going to tell her? That she made a mistake? That she needs to come home? Because if you say that, if you give her an ultimatum, you might lose her forever." He looked at me with such pain in his eyes that my heart ached for him. "What am I supposed to do, Ellie? Just let her go? Let her marry this boy and move to New York and never see her again?" "That might not be your choice to make." The words were hard, but necessary. Bernie needed to understand that Rosie was 19 years old, legally an adult, capable of making her own decisions, even if those decisions hurt the people who loved her. Dolly spoke up, her voice gentler now. "My brother is a good man, Bernie. He's studying music at a conservatory in New York. He has a scholarship, a future. He's not some criminal or drunk. He loves Rosie. I know he does." "But she's so young," Bernie protested weakly. "She doesn't understand what she's giving up. Her family, her community, her whole life." "Maybe she does understand," I said quietly. "Maybe she looked at that life and decided it wasn't worth keeping if it meant giving up the person she loves." Bernie was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, defeat written in every line of his weathered face. "I need to see her. Even if I can't change her mind, I need to see her. Make sure she's all right. Make sure—" He couldn't finish. "Then we take the midnight train tonight," I said decisively. "But Bernie, promise me something. Promise me you'll listen before you talk. That you'll hear what Rosie has to say before you tell her what you think she should do." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "I promise." We regrouped outside the flower shop a little before 11, Bernie with an old valise, Dolly with a neat carpet bag, me with a scuffed suitcase that had seen too much of the world already. Vi was there too, coat buttoned to her chin, pretending she wasn't shivering with nerves and excitement. "Remember, Vi," I told her, taking her hands for a moment. "If anyone asks, I'm visiting a sick relative, and the velvet note is dark until next week. We can't keep the place open with Bernie, Dolly, and me all gone, but even closed, she's still vulnerable." She nodded, eyes bright. I'll keep a lookout. If the police, Frank Donnelly, or anyone else starts sniffing around, you'll hear it from me first. I let her go and turned to Bernie and Dolly. All right, let's go catch a train. We left the shop and took our first steps toward the station when a black Packard drew up to the curb at our side. I recognized the car immediately, sleek, expensive, the kind of automobile that announced its owner's wealth and power without requiring words. The rear window rolled down, and a man's face appeared, handsome in a sharp, dangerous way with dark hair slicked back and eyes that missed nothing. Maxwell Sterling, owner of the Silver Swan, the most successful speakeasy on the North Side, and my chief competition for wealthy clientele. Miss Hartwood, he said, his voice smooth as good whiskey. I hear you're looking for a missing girl. I stopped walking, and Bernie and Dolly stopped with me. The street was busy enough that we weren't alone, but quiet enough that Sterling's presence felt like a threat. How did you hear that? I asked carefully. Sterling smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Word travels fast in our little world. A girl goes missing from the Velvet Note. Her grandfather's asking questions all over Chinatown. He shrugged elegantly. I make it my business to know things, Miss Hartwood. That's how I stay ahead. Stay ahead of what? Competition. His eyes moved from me to Dolly, and something predatory flickered in them. I tried to hire Miss Chen away from you last month. Did she tell you that? Offered her twice what you pay to sing at the Silver Swan, but she turned me down. Said she was loyal to you. Dolly's hand tightened on my arm. I kept my expression neutral, though anger was building in my chest. That speaks well of Miss Chen's judgment, I said coolly. Was there something you wanted, Mr. Sterling, or did you just stop by to tell us how well-informed you are? I wanted to offer my help. Of all the things he might have said, that was the least expected. I stared at him, trying to read the angle, the hidden motive. Maxwell Sterling didn't do anything without expecting something in return. Why would you help us? I asked bluntly. Because I'm not a monster, Miss Hartwood. A young girl is missing. If I have information that might help find her, it would be unconscionable not to share it. What information? Sterling leaned back in his seat, getting comfortable, like a cat settling in for a long chat. The girl, Rosie Kowalski, yes? She was at the Silver Swan last Tuesday night, with the young Chinese man who picked her up from your establishment Friday. They had dinner, champagne. They looked very much in love. Bernie made a sound like he'd been punched. They weren't hiding, Sterling continued, his eyes on Bernie now. They sat at a table near the stage, held hands, whispered to each other like young lovers do. It was quite sweet, actually. Reminded me of... He stopped himself, some old memory flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. Well, that's not important. Did you talk to them? I asked. Briefly. The young man, Tommy Chen, I believe his name is, he asked if I knew anyone in New York who could help them find work. Musicians, he said. They were both musicians. My mind raced, fitting this new piece into the puzzle. So Rosie and Tommy hadn't just run away on impulse. They'd been planning it. They'd been making connections, gathering information, preparing for their new life, which made Bernie's hope of bringing her back even more futile. I gave Tommy a few names, Sterling said, club owners in New York who owe me favors, told him to mention my name when he arrived. He paused, then added, I also told him to be careful. A Chinese man and a white woman, traveling together, living together. It's not illegal exactly, but it's not safe either. Why are you telling us this? Dolly asked, speaking for the first time. Her voice was tense, suspicious. Sterling's smile returned, but this time there was something genuine in it, something almost sad. Because 20 years ago, I was in love with a woman my family didn't approve of. I ran away with her, left everything behind for a fresh start. It didn't work out. She died in the influenza epidemic of 1918, but I don't regret trying. Sometimes love is worth the risk, Miss Chen. He tapped the roof of his car, and the driver began to pull away, but Sterling leaned out the window one last time. Miss Hartwood, when you return from New York, and you will return, because people like us always do, come see me. I'd like to discuss a business arrangement. Nothing sinister, he added, seeing my expression. Just a conversation between professionals. The Speakeasy business is changing, and I think we could benefit from working together rather than against each other. The car rolled away before I could respond, leaving the three of us standing on the sidewalk in silence. I don't trust him, Dolly said finally. Neither do I agreed, but he gave us valuable information. Rosie and Tommy have been planning this for at least a week, maybe longer. Bernie, who'd been silent through the entire exchange, finally spoke. She chose him, over her family, over everything we are. There was no anger in his voice now, just a deep, terrible sadness. She chose herself, I said gently, and the life she wanted. That's not a betrayal, Bernie. That's just growing up. He didn't answer, but something in his face shifted. Not acceptance exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The midnight train to New York was mostly empty on a Saturday night. Bernie, Dolly, and I found seats in the rear car, away from other passengers, where we could talk without being overheard. Bernie hadn't spoken much since we'd left the Velvet Note. He stared out the window as the train pulled away from Chicago, watching the city disappear behind us, his face unreadable. Dolly sat beside me, also quiet, lost in her own thoughts. I wondered what she was thinking, about her brother, about the choices he'd made, about the family that might reject him for loving the wrong person. I pulled out a notebook and began making lists, because that's what I did when the world felt chaotic. I organized it into neat columns and action items. What we knew, Rosie and Tommy had been planning to run away together. They'd been making connections in New York through Sterling's contacts. They'd left Friday night on the midnight train. They'd arrived in New York Saturday evening. What we didn't know, where exactly they were staying in New York. Whether Tommy's conservatory scholarship was real. If Sterling's contacts would actually help them. What Rosie would say when she saw Bernie. What could go wrong? Rosie could refuse to see Bernie. Bernie could say something that drove Rosie away forever. Tommy could be using Rosie for some reason we hadn't figured out yet. They could be in danger from people who didn't approve of their relationship. The last item made me pause. I'd been so focused on the family drama, the scandal of an interracial romance, the heartbreak of Bernie losing his granddaughter, that I'd almost overlooked the more practical danger. In a city like New York or Chicago or anywhere in 1920s America, a Chinese man and a white woman living together would face more than just social disapproval. They'd face violence. I thought about the stories I'd heard, the whispers at the Velvet Note from customers who'd traveled to other cities. Stories of mixed couples being attacked on the street, arrested on trumped-up charges, run out of neighborhoods. Stories of moral crusaders who saw it as their duty to enforce racial boundaries with fists and clubs. Sterling had told Tommy to be careful. I wondered if Tommy had listened. Beside me, Dolly shifted in her seat. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think they're doing the right thing? Running away? Starting over? I considered the question carefully. I think they're doing what they believe is necessary. Whether it's right or not, that depends on who's judging. My parents disowned me, Dolly said quietly. When I left San Francisco, refused the marriage they'd arranged, they said I was shaming the family, rejecting our culture. For a long time I thought they were wrong, that I was entitled to choose my own path. And now I understand them better. The fear they carried, that their children would forget where they came from, would become too American, too white, that we'd lose ourselves trying to fit into a world that would never fully accept us. She looked out the window at the darkening landscape. Tommy is choosing love over family. I did the same thing. But the cost, Ellie, the cost is so high sometimes. I put my hand over hers. Do you regret it? No, she said immediately. But I mourn it. The family I could have had, the connection I lost. Tommy will mourn it too. And so will Rosie. But they'll have each other. Will that be enough? Dolly turned to look at me, her eyes serious. When the world is cruel to them, when doors close and people stare and opportunities disappear, will love be enough to make up for everything they're losing? I didn't have an answer. I'd been married to Thomas for 5 years before he died, and I'd loved him, but I wasn't sure if that love would have survived if we'd had to give up everything else to be together. It was easy to be in love when the world approved, when society smiled on your union and gave you its blessing. It was much harder when the world actively tried to tear you apart. We'll find out, I said finally, when we find them in New York. The train rocked through the night, carrying us toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. We arrived at Grand Central Terminal late Sunday afternoon, stepping into a city that made Chicago look like a small town. New York was bigger, louder, faster, a place where ambition and desperation mingled in equal measure, where fortunes were made and lost between breakfast and lunch. Finding 2 specific people in a city of millions should have been impossible, but Sterling had given Tommy names, and Dolly knew which conservatory Tommy had been attending. We had threads to follow, even if they were thin ones. We started with the conservatory, the Manhattan School of Music on the Upper East Side. Inside, the front office was dark behind a glass door with "Office Hours Monday-Friday" painted in gold leaf, but the building itself wasn't empty. Music drifted down the corridor, someone running scales on a violin, a piano hammering out arpeggios, and a thin woman with severe glasses sat at a folding table in the lobby, sorting through a stack of recital programs. She looked us up and down with obvious disapproval. "Classes aren't in session today," she said. "Administration's closed, auditions and practice only." "We're not here for classes," Dolly said. "We're looking for my brother, Thomas Chen. This is an emergency." The woman hesitated, eyeing Dolly with a little more interest. "Family?" "I'm his sister," Dolly said. "Please, we just need to know if he's here, if he's all right." The woman sighed, set down her stack of programs, and stood. "I'm only a student assistant. I'm not supposed to give out information, but I can check the enrollment cards. That's all." She disappeared through a side door. We waited in a silence thick enough to chew. When she came back, she was holding a small stack of index cards and wearing the faintly smug expression of someone whose suspicions had just been confirmed. "Thomas Chen is not currently enrolled," she said primly. "According to this, his scholarship was terminated 3 months ago for non-attendance. No current address on file." Dolly went pale. Bernie looked up sharply. "Terminated!" Dolly's voice was faint. "He hasn't been a student here for some time," the woman said, already sliding the cards back into order. I felt the ground shifting under us. Tommy Chen wasn't a student. He didn't have a scholarship or a future as a musician in New York. He'd been lying, to Dolly, probably to Rosie, possibly to himself about what kind of life they'd have here. "Did he leave a forwarding address?" I asked. "No, and I'm afraid I don't have any more information." We left the conservatory in stunned silence. Outside, Bernie finally spoke. "The boy is a liar," he said flatly. "He told Rosie he was a student, that he had prospects. He brought her here under false pretenses. "We don't know that," Dolly said desperately. "Maybe Tommy found work elsewhere. Maybe he has an apartment. Maybe he's a con artist who saw an opportunity in a naive 19-year-old girl," Bernie interrupted. "Or maybe he's just a boy as lost as she is, and now they're both in trouble." The second possibility was worse, somehow. If Tommy was deliberately deceiving Rosie, at least that meant he had a plan, however unethical. But if he was just another desperate kid trying to make it in New York, if he'd brought Rosie here on nothing but love and hope, they were going to crash so hard. "Sterling gave Tommy names," I said, thinking out loud. "Club owners. Maybe one of them hired Tommy or knows where he's staying." By then, afternoon light had gone, and the city was sliding toward evening. It was too late in the day, and we were too wrung out to start chasing club owners across Manhattan. We found a cheap hotel near the station, peeling wallpaper, thin towels, but beds and a door that locked. None of us slept well, but we lay down for a few hours anyway, letting the weight of travel and disappointment press us into the mattresses. The next morning, New York was already wide awake by the time we stepped back onto the street. Delivery boys dodged trolley cars, office girls hurried past in sensible shoes, newsboys shouted headlines about scandals that had nothing to do with us. We started with Sterling's list. New York's speakeasies made Chicago's look provincial. We visited 3 that morning, each one more elaborate than the last. Hidden bars behind bookstore facades, basement clubs with secret passwords, rooftop establishments with views of the Manhattan skyline. Each one was bigger than the Velvet Note, with better liquor and more sophisticated clientele. And at each one, the response to Sterling's name was the same: respect, wariness, and immediate cooperation. Maxwell Sterling, it seemed, had a reputation that extended well beyond Chicago. At the third club, a place called the Blue Room in Greenwich Village, we finally got a lead. The manager, a heavy-set man with a cigar permanently attached to his lip, remembered Tommy. "Sure, I remember him. Chinese kid, good-looking," said Sterling sent him, asked if I needed a piano player. The manager shrugged. I didn't, but I felt bad for the kid. He looked desperate, so I told him about a boarding house in the Bowery that takes in musicians, run by a woman named Ruth Callahan. She's got a soft spot for strays. He gave us the address and we headed downtown. The Bowery was everything the Upper East Side wasn't. Crowded, dirty, alive with the kind of desperate energy that came from too many people with too little money trying to survive in too small a space. The boarding house was a narrow 4-story building squeezed between a pawn shop and a soup kitchen. Ruth Callahan answered the door herself, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "I'm looking for Tommy Chen," Dolly said. "We were told he might be staying here." Recognition flickered across Ruth's face, followed by concern. "You family?" "I'm his sister. These are friends. We need to speak with him. It's urgent." Ruth hesitated, then nodded. "4th floor, last room on the left. But you should know, he's not alone." We climbed 4 flights of narrow stairs, my heart pounding more from anxiety than exertion. What would we find? What would Rosie say when she saw Bernie? Would she be angry that we'd followed her, or relieved? The door to the last room was slightly ajar. I knocked gently. "Come in," a voice called, young, male, wary. We entered a small room with peeling wallpaper and a single window that looked out over an alley. There was a narrow bed, a washstand, 1 chair, and sitting on the bed holding hands were Tommy Chen and Rosie Kowalski. They looked exactly like what they were. 2 kids playing at being adults, trying desperately to make something work that might be doomed from the start. Rosie saw Bernie and jumped to her feet. "Dziadek," she said, the Polish word for grandfather, and her voice broke on it. Bernie crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. He didn't say anything. just held her, and I saw his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Tommy stood defensive, his arm around Rosie's shoulders. "We're not coming back," he said, trying to sound firm but coming across as scared. "We're getting married. We're starting a new life here." "With what money?" Bernie asked, his voice raw. "With what prospects?" "Dolly told me about your scholarship, Tommy, about how you lost it." Tommy's face flushed. "I can find work. I'm a good musician. Someone will hire me." "To do what?" Bernie gestured at the tiny room. "This is what you brought my Rosie to? This is the life you promised her?" "I love her." Tommy's voice rose, desperate. "That's more than some arranged marriage could give her. That's more than—" "Love doesn't pay the rent," Bernie said bluntly. "Love doesn't put food on the table or keep you safe when people decide they don't like your kind mixing with their kind. Love is wonderful, boy, but it's not enough." Rosie pulled away from Bernie, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like in Chicago, Giadek. The way Mama looks at me, like I'm a disappointment. The way the other Polish girls talk about me because I work at Marshall Fields instead of getting married. I don't want that life. I want to be more than what they expect me to be." "So you ran away to New York to be poor instead?" Bernie's voice cracked. "To live in a room half the size of your bedroom at home? To struggle and starve and—" "To be free," Rosie interrupted. "To choose my own path, even if it's hard." The room fell silent. I saw the moment Bernie understood, really understood, what this was about. Not just young love or rebellion, but something deeper. Rosie was fighting for her right to exist on her own terms, to build a life that belonged to her and her alone. It was the same fight I'd fought when I'd left Philadelphia, the same fight Dolly had fought when she'd left San Francisco, the same fight women had been fighting forever against families and communities and societies that wanted to keep them small and safe and contained. Bernie sank into the single chair, suddenly looking very old and very tired. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "My blessing? Because I can't give you that, Rosie. I can't pretend this is what I wanted for you." "I don't need your blessing," Rosie said, but her voice was soft now, sad. I needed you to know I'm all right, that I'm happy. Or I will be." Dolly had been silent until now, standing beside me in the doorway, but now she spoke, addressing her brother. "You lied to me," she said, "about the scholarship, about your prospects." Tommy's defiance crumbled. "I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could fix it, get the scholarship back or find something else. But then I met Rosie, and she was so miserable in Chicago, and I thought maybe we could fix it together." "That's not how life works," Dolly said, but her voice was gentle. "You can't run from your problems and expect them to disappear. They just follow you." "What should we have done?" Tommy asked desperately. "Stayed in Chicago where her family would never accept me? Where we'd have to hide our relationship, sneak around like criminals?" "No," I said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at me. "But you should have planned better, made sure you had jobs lined up, a place to live, something to sustain you beyond hope and love." I crossed to the window, looking out at the narrow alley below. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice taking on the tone I used when managing my speakeasy, firm, practical, allowing no argument. "You two are going to stay here for now. Bernie is going to give you enough money for 2 months' rent and food." Bernie opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "You're going to give them money," I repeated, "because you love your granddaughter and you want her to be safe. And Rosie, Tommy, you're going to use that time to find real jobs. Not dreams of being musicians, but actual work that pays actual money. Tommy, there are dozens of restaurants in Chinatown that need dishwashers or delivery boys. Rosie, there are department stores here too. You'll find work. I turned to face them. And in 2 months, if you've made it work, if you've kept your jobs and paid your rent and proven you can actually build a life together, then Bernie will give you his blessing. Won't you, Bernie? Bernie looked at Rosie's hopeful face, at Tommy's desperate expression, and I saw him make the hardest choice a parent or grandparent can make, to let go, even when every instinct screams to hold tighter. 2 months, he said hoarsely. But Rosie, you write to me. Every week. You tell me you're safe, you're eating, you're all right. If I don't hear from you, I'm coming back here and dragging you home. Rosie flew across the room and threw her arms around Bernie's neck. I promise, Jadek. I promise. Dolly moved to her brother, speaking to him quietly in Cantonese. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Love mixed with disappointment, hope mixed with worry, the eternal mixture of family. We left them there in that tiny room in the Bowery with Bernie's money in their pockets and our warnings in their ears. As we descended the narrow stairs, I heard music start up behind us. Tommy at a battered piano I hadn't noticed in the corner, Rosie's voice joining his in a song I didn't recognize. They sounded good together. Not perfect, not professional, but genuine, real. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe love, combined with hard work and stubborn determination, could build something lasting. Or maybe they'd come crawling back to Chicago in 2 months, broke and heartbroken and wiser. Either way, they'd made their choice. The train ride back to Chicago was quieter than the trip out. Bernie sat by the window staring at the landscape rolling past, lost in thoughts I couldn't read. Dolly dozed fitfully, her head on my shoulder. I pulled out my notebook again, not to make lists this time, but to record everything that had happened. I wrote about Rosie's excitement and Tommy's lies and Sterling's unexpected help. I wrote about the tiny room in the Bowery and the sound of music floating down the stairs. And I wrote about the choice Bernie had made, to let Rosie go even though it broke his heart. Because that's what love sometimes demanded. Not control, not possession, but the courage to step back and let people make their own mistakes. As the sun set over the Indiana farmland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about all the ways people run away from things and toward things, and how sometimes those were the same impulse wearing different faces. I'd run away from Philadelphia, from Thomas's family, from a life that had become unbearable, but I'd also run toward something. Independence, freedom, the chance to build something that was entirely mine. Rosie was doing the same thing. So was Tommy. So, in their own ways, were Dolly and Bernie and Vi and everyone else who populated the Velvet Note. We were all refugees from one life or another, building new lives in the spaces between what we'd lost and what we hoped to find. The train back to Chicago pulled into Union Station early Tuesday morning. We stumbled off, exhausted, and found Vi waiting for us on the platform, bouncing with barely contained energy. "Did you find her?" she asked immediately. "Is she all right? Did you bring her back?" "We found her," I said. "She's staying in New York, with Tommy." "But—" "She made her choice, Vi," Bernie said quietly, "and I had to respect it." Vi looked at him, at his exhausted face, and understood. She linked her arm through his, and together we walked back to Flower Shop. The Velvet Note was dark when we arrived. We filed down the familiar stairs. I lit a single lamp behind the bar that cast warm shadows across the burgundy velvet and brass fixtures. Home. This was home, in a way that Philadelphia had never been, in a way that Thomas's house had never been. This underground kingdom I'd built, populated by misfits and outcasts, and people brave enough to break unjust laws in search of music and connection, and a few hours of joy. Bernie sank into his usual corner seat. Dolly moved behind the bar and started pouring drinks without asking what anyone wanted. Vi collapsed onto a stool, pulling out her notebook to record everything we'd told her about New York, and I stood in the middle of my speakeasy, looking at these people who'd become my family, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it took my breath away. "To Rosie," Dolly said, raising her glass. "May she find what she's looking for." "To Tommy," Bernie added quietly. "May he be worthy of her." "To choices," Vi said. "Even the hard ones." I raised my own glass. "To all of us." Still standing. We drank, and the gin was sharp and clean and exactly what we needed. Finn descended from the shop upstairs, carrying a telegram. "This came for you while you were gone," he said, handing it to me. "From Sterling." I opened it, already knowing it wouldn't be good news. Sterling's business arrangement he'd mentioned, I'd hoped he'd forgotten about it. Of course he hadn't. The telegram was short. "Miss Hartwood, expect a visit Wednesday evening. We have much to discuss. Regards, Sterling." I passed it to Finn, who read it and swore under his breath. "What does he want?" Dolly asked, seeing our expressions. "I don't know," I admitted. "But Maxwell Sterling doesn't make social calls. Whatever he wants, it's going to be complicated." Bernie looked up from his drink. "Be careful with that one, Ellie. Men like Sterling, they see the world as a chessboard. Everyone's a piece to be moved." "I know," I said. "But I also know that ignoring him isn't an option. If he wants a meeting, I'll give him a meeting, and I'll find out what he's really after." "Not alone," Finn said firmly. "Whatever game he's playing, you don't play it alone." I nodded. For now, in this moment, surrounded by people I trusted, bottles of illegal spirits, and music that existed only in memory, I was exactly where I needed to be. I wondered what challenges Wednesday would bring, what new mysteries would find their way down my stairs and into my life. Whatever they were, I'd face them. With wit, with gin, and with this remarkable family I'd found in the unlikeliest of places.